Hi everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to adult survivors of child sexual abuse. We know the numbers are huge, we know that they're growing with the advent of AI, and we know that we need to be vigilant, keeping an eye out for our young ones and young people. I'm back here with part 2 with Mike Chapman. He is a founder of Polar Life Consulting. He's a life coach. He's a host of an amazing podcast dedicated to male survivors. But because we cannot start, as you know, unless we have a trigger warning, I'm going to give that right now. That is to keep you safe. If you feel triggered, please don't persist. These interviews stay up ad infinitum, so you won't lose anything by switching off. And go to the show notes and check out some resources and support, or just simply switch everything off and come back at a later time. Welcome back to you, Mike, and such an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me back.
So in this part, we're looking at your wisdom, please. So what?
Well, if gray hair is a good showing of that, I have plenty of that.
Oh, well, there you go. We've got to have something to go with the grey hair, don't we?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, Mike, for you, what was kind of adulthood? So we're kind of tracking from, I think you were 30 years old, you had your beautiful first child, memories started to come at you thick and fast, and you recognized there was some trauma to face into.
Right.
From that point kind of till now, what have you been doing? What engages you? Share with us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, part of that healing journey, going through all of that, like I said, last episode, I went on malesurvivor.org. Huge help, wonderful resource. Was able to share from my heart and then talk to other men as well. And then learning about what is so common and what is normal, even the things that we would never think of might be related to the abuse. There's so many signs and symptoms um, that come with this. And especially for males, it gets so confusing to there's so much grooming that uh makes it seem that we are complicit in the abuse, and that physiologically, because of how the male body is wired, it does not take much to get things stimulated. You can have erections, ejaculations, and so forth happening during the abuse. And the abusers will use that against you, saying, see, you're enjoying this. So that means it's okay.
Yeah.
You're consenting, even though you have no idea what's going on. And I hear so that story that wasn't part of my story because I was sedated for most of it, but that is so common for men. And I was going through my own healing, seeing all these commonalities with men that didn't necessarily apply to my story, but such a huge need. So many men not telling, and did my own research that some abusers will choose boys over girls to abuse if they don't really have a preference because boys don't tell.
Yes. Now, I want to stop you there because what you said, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to actually firm up this point. Mike, when you're really cold, what does your body do?
It shivers.
Shivers. When you're really, really hot, what does your body do?
It sweats.
Right. When you are being deliberately touched and targeted to experience sexual arousal, what will your body do?
Yes, it will respond. Yes.
respond. So
Physiologically,
the
yes.
body, thank you, the body is designed for both male and female survivors to respond to stimuli. That is how we are
Yes.
made. We cannot switch that off. So for all you
Yes.
beautiful males watching, please notice that, and women as well. You know, the point is we're designed to experience pleasure. That's what that is. Don't let that be used as more grooming to shut down how you feel about it all. Back to you,
Right.
Mike. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And learning that as I shared, that so helped with my healing. And they say journal as much as you can. I hate journaling. I've always hated pen to paper journaling, absolutely hated it. But going online and sharing from my heart, but then not only sharing, but getting all this feedback from all these other men out there who had similar experiences. And that was so helpful. And then I could respond to other people who were there as well and help them as they helped me, and we helped each other. So learning such benefit from that. Then I went on to, I had friends around that same time encouraged me to go to a Christian faith-based 12-step group that I went to called Celebrate Recovery. And I went to that as well. So um, was able to share a little bit more in person as well about my issues. And that was helpful. Um, Talking about it in the flesh, and getting over the shame and the guilt, knowing that none of that is due on me anyway. But being able, the more I shared, the easier it became to share. And then eventually I got to the point where I was asked to share my story uh, in their big group. And I did. And that was so freeing as well.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I listened to one podcast called No Longer Ashamed, and they interview, like you, survivors of abuse. And it was a new podcast, and they just talked about, they were both survivors, one male, one female, just friends, and invited people to share their story. And I was the first one to volunteer. So I was their first actual interview for that podcast. It was the first time I had shared in that public of a venue, and horribly nervous. It's all online. You can find it on my podcast, on my website. And, but it went well, and it was so freeing to share my story. And they were wonderful. They're so sweet. Just like you, I get that same sense that you're just so sweet and kind, knowing it's so hard for so many survivors to share their story, especially if it's their first time sharing. But it was so freeing to share. And it was also this wonderful tool. So if I wanted someone to know my story and I didn't really want to share it necessarily, it's like I could just send them the link to, yeah, there's the podcast episode where I share my story if you're interested. And then they could listen to it. And it's like, wow, okay. And I wouldn't necessarily have to share it again. So that
I
was
like
so
that.
powerful. Yes.
I like that, but I want to ask you because one of the things I noticed was that, you know, there are many survivors who will watch this, Mike, who maybe don't have the courage to verbalize, but I always encourage people to find there are so many ways to release what has
Yes.
happened.
Yes.
So you might want to throw rocks at a cliff. You might want to go for a 100K run. You might want to
Yes.
do some artwork. You might want to
Yes.
create pots. So can you tell us any ideas you have for survivors that maybe want to release but don't quite feel they can do it verbally yet? What would you?
Right. Using the arts for sure. I started writing poetry. Uh, I've written 4 poems now. I'm not great at poetry, never have been, but these things just poured out of me, and it's like the younger parts of me really wanted to tell their story. And um, then Doug Carpenter, who we were in a support group online together, he was writing a book on male survivors. It's on Amazon. It's called Secret Shame by Dr. Douglas Carpenter. Plug for his book. He asked if he could include two of my poems in his book, and he
Wow.
did. So, because yeah, it hit the mark, and it described the abuse, not grotesquely, but yeah, from the child's point of view. And I felt so seen and so honored, but that was so freeing to get that out. But I know uh, other ways, through music, through art, song, poetry. And I heard that all of that is right brain activity. And this type of trauma is also stored in the right brain, research has shown. So, using any kind of artistic expression can often unlock or release those areas of the brain that is storing the trauma, and it can be a release. An example of this, and I've shared this on other podcasts, I attended a weekend event for male survivors. And during one of the breaks, one of the guys in the group shared that, yeah, he did art on his spare time. He liked to just do art. And he pulled out his phone and showed us a lot of his artwork. It was all very abstract, lots of geometric shapes and so forth. And then I'm looking, and I mentioned, wow, that's so wonderful that you're sharing your abuse story through your artwork. And he said, no, I'm not. No, this has nothing to do with that. It's like, no, dude, totally. Like this picture right here, that's that river and that's that lake you were talking about. And he's going, no, it's not. And then somebody else who knew the story who was looking as well, yeah, that's totally the story you just told, like an hour ago in the other group. It's like, no, it's not. And we had to convince him. Apparently, his inner self, inner child was communicating his story through the art, and he didn't even realize it. He was just putting as far as he knew, random stuff on canvas, but it was telling a story. It was that inner child inside of him communicating that story of the abuse through the art, and he didn't even realize it because all of that, it was all connected and it was just amazing story. So yes, art, any kind of creativeness you can do helps you to release it, helps to process it, and you can unlock so many things through that. So the brain is just amazing how it's wired, how it's designed, and how it can heal. I've learned the concept of neuroplasticity, which I love that word. It means our brains can relearn and unlearn. They're not locked in stone. That there's hope even for old dogs. We can still learn new tricks, as they say, and that's so true. I've learned how to deal with these things. I've learned how to reprocess so much of the trauma and rewire it. And um, one of the groups I ended up getting involved with is an online group called husbandmaterial.com. Their main focus is for men dealing with pornography addiction. However, it's also just in general sexual brokenness. And I came on talking about my story of abuse, and the man who ran the group was so interested in that, and we ran polls, and huge percentage of the men in this group who were dealing with pornography addiction were sexually abused as children and realizing, yes, this is actually a huge need. So now that is my focus within his ministry as well, is working with men there who deal with abuse. And that resulted in me becoming a coach for him, getting additional training to become a recovery life coach, and now having my own uh, company as well, Polar Life Consulting, where I work with men as a coach. I now have a website. There's lots of free resources, including my own podcast. We have a chat room, all geared towards male survivors of abuse. And it's been such a blessing for me to reach out to other men and help them find their voice, find their healing. And uh, podcast is dedicated to allowing men a safe place to tell their story.
It's amazing. And I think, just the fact that you've been able to turn around what happened to you as a lived uh, experience expert,
Right.
You can completely relate and understand what these men are bringing to you and coming along with. And, it's so powerful. And I thank you so much, because the advocacy and resources so needed. And yeah, thank
Right.
you. It's lovely.
Yes.
Well, and what else
And
are you doing? You host your own podcast, Male
yes.
Survivor Stories.
Well,
Can you tell us a little about that?
oh yes. Uh like I said, it's we now have that weekly and we do it live now.
Do you?
So yes, which is kind of scary. We don't within my chat room, they get the invite for the link, and then we do it live. So if they want to join live, uh, questions and answers with with the guest, and then that then gets edited and then comes out within the next few weeks after that. And that's been working out well. And the dynamic of having audience members throwing in questions and answers has been very nice. All survivors, of course. Um, and they're screened, they're part of my group. So if you want to join live, you have to get into the chat room and then you get the link from the chat room. And it's been so nice. A few, I've had people who've shared their story several times, and also one person never shared spoken ever his story, and I felt so honored. And as he was sharing, a few new memories that he had not necessarily repressed, but had just kind of hidden away started coming to the surface, and he added that. He ended up sharing that during his share time, and then told me about it later. Yeah, that when I told that story, that was actually I had completely blocked that out and it just came to the forefront and then it was time to share. So being able to have that out there to allow men to share and other male survivors to hear so many men sharing their truth, knowing that they're not alone. Um, and then also we feel so unworthy of succeeding, unworthy of affection and even safety being around children because there's the mistaken belief that male abusers must become perpetrators. And it's the stats are very small percentage. Is that ever true for?
So
Um,
that I'm really glad you raised that, because I want to ask you. I've heard two very strong voices on this. One says, and it's not just male survivors, by the way. It's putting women and female survivors too. That it's less than 10% of people like you and
right,
I, Mike, that will go on to sexually abuse a child.
right.
But
Right.
I heard that I also heard last week that it's actually a third of survivors will go on.
No, I think that is mistaken from out of all of those who were perpetrators, there is a large percentage who were abused. However, out of all of the numbers who have been abused, a very small percentage go on to abuse others.
That's what I had thought, because I know that every survivor I interview, probably including you, says the same thing. I'm sharing my story so that this never happens to another child again.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
And I would be horrified if that were to happen to
yeah,
another child.
yeah. I thank you
And
for clarifying that, because
yeah,
I just I struggle with that, and I find myself thinking, where do people get this information from?
right.
Um, because yeah, it's
Yeah.
so. Mike,
Um,
we've got
mhm,
about 3 or 4 minutes. What advice would you give? I mean, I know you focus only on men. I focus on everyone.
right.
That's great. But what
Hmm.
advice would you, if you could, not forget men, but include women, if that's okay? What
Well,
advice
yes.
would you give to survivors?
The thing I close out of my podcast is you are not alone. The abuse was not your fault. Hope and healing is out there. You just have to find it. But then I repeat and I look right in the camera if it's a video thing. The abuse was not your fault.
Yes.
That survivors so often we tend to blame ourselves.
Yeah.
And the perpetrators use that as part of the grooming, that they will add the blame to the child.
Yeah.
But children cannot consent to these acts at all. And yeah, you can find freedom for sure. One other thing that I wanted to mention, uh, I part of my healing, I ended up doing something on the side I never thought I would ever do, but always in the back of my mind, I always wanted to do that. I am now a part-time professional Santa Claus portrayal artist, which explains the beard. And yeah, I've got a photo. I don't know if it'll show up
I
on
don't
here.
actually
Let's
know what
see.
that even means. Use plain
Yes,
language. What does it mean?
I'm a Santa.
Oh, well, actually, you look very, very similar to one.
Yes. I just pulled up the photo and then there we go. And see if it's going to, I'm on Blur.
Because your
I've got
background's
this.
there.
I'm on Blur. I've got the photo right here. See if
It's
no,
still a
I'm on
blurry
Blur. Oh, there we go.
background.
There,
Uh,
there we go.
there you go. A safe center.
Yes,
A
yes.
safe
So,
center.
yes. And so in season I do different video visits. I was a mall Santa for a shopping mall for 3 years and all of that during my healing journey, and it was a way to um feed that inner child in me and give him joy and then spread joy to others, especially so many children. And um yeah, it's just been a blessing for me and for other people and just adults too who need joy. My first year was 2020, mid heavy COVID. Everyone was miserable. My mall still had a Santa. We were 12 feet away, but I was able to spread joy to so many people during that time when there was not a lot of joy out there. So, um, getting to a place where I could be healed enough and feel confident enough to do that, working with children, um,
Yeah, that's
was
amazing.
just
And
yes.
I just want to take you sideways a bit. What advice would you give to survivors who get challenged about, they get comments like, haven't you been able to move on from that yet? Or it's funny that you talk about that, you still talk about that, or
Right.
it's this absolute minimizing of the trauma, absolute
Right. It
decimation.
is severe trauma, um, and they call it a healing journey, and it is. I mean, I've made tons of healing strides, but I'm nowhere near done. I'm continuing to heal, continuing to dig into the woundedness, realizing, oh, yes, there's still areas that need tweaking. Um, and the lifelong effects, in the US, they did something called ACEs, which stands ACE,
Yes, I know what
Adverse
it is.
Childhood
Yeah,
Experiences.
yeah,
Yes. And it's a survey of 10 questions, and they base if you have a yes, how many yeses of those 10, and if you give like 2 or 3 or 4, they did all of the ongoing effects of what that would do for uh, people who have gone through those things. So the physiological effects, the mental effects, either uh, unplanned pregnancies or uh, parenting a child for men that you impregnated someone unplanned, to
yeah,
cancer, to stomach issues, to liver issues, ongoing issues, because all that trauma is stored in the body, and it takes a long time to heal from that, especially if for so many of us, it was not a one-time event. It was ongoing abuse, ongoing trauma, and it takes a long time to heal from that. There's a lot of wounds
yep.
that need to be dealt with, and it's not a pill you can take and magically heal. So it is a process. So please
Yes.
be patient with us.
Yeah, 100%. Mike, we need to end, but can we just maybe have one last comment, or even what you end your amazing podcast with, just something that can stay with our audience,
Yes.
please?
Yes, like I said, help is out there. You can find healing, and know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. Let me say
Beautiful.
it one more time. The abuse was not your fault.
Thank you so much. Please stay there, Mike. And audience, what a gift, and such a powerful reminder. And Mike shared many things, and I really grateful to him, because with his ability to share means, for those of you watching who haven't been able to, you can feel less alone. One of the things he said was, he talked about neuroplasticity in the brain, and I love that, because it means we're not one and done. It means we're not confined to this happened, therefore I must be. It allows us to unlearn, relearn, and create what works for us, for our healing and our future. Thank you so much. So as usual, beautiful ones, I will put all Mike's links to all that he's doing, his podcast, his life coaching, and his Polar Life Consulting website up on the show notes, so that you can access that. As always, until next time, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.